Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Eric Devin and Rich Allen. The fireworks have started early this November, so who put on a display this weekend in France and who will be foiled in their plot to dethrone the champions? A look at an exciting Ligue weekend after the latest headlines. Paris Saint-Germain now have a record 12 wins in a row to start the season as they won 2-1 against then second-placed Lille. Kylian Mbappe and Neymar grabbed the 2 goals for the champions as they prepare for a big game in midweek in Naples. On Saturday, Lyon dropped the ball as Andreas Cornelius' strike earned Bordeaux a point, while Rennes got back to winning ways as they inflicted a 2-1 result on Caen, who lost their first home game of the season. Monaco are still winless under Thierry Henry as they were sunk by a 1-0 victory for Reims. Nice sneaked a 1-0 win over Amiens thanks to a Prince Desir Guano own goal, and Strasbourg played out a 1-1 draw with Toulouse. Dijon are now winless in their last 9 as they were thumped 4-0 by Nîmes, while on Sunday, Nantes gazumped lowly Guingamp 5-0 with Emiliano Sala grabbing another brace. Saint-Etienne played out the game of the weekend against Angers as they eventually ran out 4-3 winners as both teams had brief leads, while in the final match of the weekend, Montpellier laid down the hammer on Marseille as they ran out 3-0 winners. A double from Gaëtan Laborde means La Paillade are now second in the table. And that's all for now, but to keep up with all the news that comes out of the world of French football, do head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with the game that's just finished a few minutes ago in Montpellier as they trounced Marseille 3-0. A couple of defensive mistakes from the away side allow Montpellier to rise into second, but we're going to focus on the other team in this result. First of all, Rich, it was a disappointing performance again from Marseille. As many have already pointed out, that's now their 5th loss already this season. They only lost 5 games in total last season when they finished 4th, which wasn't quite good enough for Champions League football. Is it time to start worrying about their chances to get Champions League football again with so much more football to play that the 5 losses could be a real negative and a worry for them?
I think it's absolutely the time to start worrying. It's not been the best of starts. I think as almost with last season, I think results certainly earlier in the season perhaps flattered them slightly, and perhaps sort of paved over the performance and masked the performance of Marseille. It's the defense again. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we've touched on it on preview show after preview show and main show after main show that the defense is just not strong enough, and it was plainly evident tonight. Rami was guilty of some really static defending for that first goal. Silly mistakes from Amavi, lack of cohesion, lack of communication between that back 4 just leaves gaping holes in that defence. And when you've got Mandanda, who's not at his best anymore, it's just a bit of a recipe for disaster and culminates in performances as we saw tonight. You can praise Marseille for some of the signings that they've gone about doing. I think Strootman will prove to be a fairly solid signing, and seasons more recently that have gone by, Gustavo has proved to be a huge success, but they still don't seem to be able to plug those gaps. And it's fair enough to do it bit by bit, but when you're leaving such a mess that is that defense, you're asking for trouble. Garcia's not totally blameless on this. I've seen plenty of Marseille fans questioning tonight his squad selection, and maybe no matter how nice it was that they got to the Europa League final, ultimately they did miss out on Champions League football, which should have been well within their grasps last season. it's looking increasingly more tricky that Champions League football is on the cards this season. I know that that they're only they're only 6 points off, but Montpellier, Lille are playing terrific stuff at the minute. Marseille are not, and now the defence is being found out yet again. I think there's real problems there. So I think come January, if this project is to bring, success and Champions League football to the club, they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to recruit, and probably recruit slightly en masse as well.
Eric, the worry about this one is this summer wasn't exactly cheap for Marseille. They spent around about 52 million euros on various different signings, and there was always alarm bells about the defence, and we've pointed out on a number of occasions that they should have gone out and done a little bit more. But at the same time, what should be more worrying for the team is not just some of the players that are coming in not quite performing to a level. Strootman was poor tonight, but they didn't create much in this one. They've not been quite as all guns blazing in the last couple of weeks, at least. There's the likes of Jordan Amavi, who was good last season but had a really poor evening tonight. Is that more alarming, that those that established players at the club that they were really leaning on last season aren't quite up to the standard they were last season as well?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair point to make. I think that first to the transfer thing, looking back at the summer window, it did seem that they were addressing positions of need, and Radonjic being a versatile attacking player, able to play on both flanks, and Kalatakar being a young central defender who was taken to the World Cup. Didn't feature except for maybe save one match, if I recall correctly. But again, they seem to be addressing positions of need in the summer, but how the signings have worked out is another story. And I talked at length about my frustration with Antonio Zubizarreta the other weekend on the show, and I think that's again, it's a big question to be asked for Frank Lacourt as to whether he wants to entrust Zubizarreta with additional significant funds to try and improve this team. But more to the point, because again, this team is still, with Strootman coming on board, still roughly the same side that advanced to a European final, that push for the Champions League for most of the season. Had by all accounts a really good season. There were really good signs of improvement under Rudy Garcia, and I think that what we're seeing at the current state of affairs is that Marseille are just lacking a level of consistency, and I think they're also perhaps lacking depth. I think that it's interesting when we look at that defense. Well, there are two players who have been at various points in their career capable, at the very least, and above average at their very best defenders, in Gary Sertic and Thomas Hubachan. Now, I know they've had their struggles with injury, but they, in particular, I think, could be options to give that defense a little more solidity, a little more experience, and to not have these players playing, 2 matches week in, week out, which is necessarily going to wear them down. I think that's the frustration, that there's not really another orthodox left back besides Jordan Amavi. There's not really another central defender that Rudy Garcia seems to fully trust besides Adil Rami. I mean, clearly the fact that he's playing, again, Kamara is an intriguing prospect, but still, as we saw tonight, not quite there yet. The fact that he's playing Luis Gustavo there regularly. This lack of rotation and this lack of focus is a product of Garcia simply not trusting the squad he has. And that really leads me to believe in what sort of context, how closely is he working with Zubizarreta in terms of this recruitment that's leaving this side, which again should have a reasonable level of depth, looking so bereft of it and looking so poor. I'm not really sure what to say. I don't think the Champions League is totally out of reach, but again, as we'll get on to, Montpellier and Lille are playing well, as we mentioned earlier, and with those sides, again, Marseille's European season looks to be over, but there's still 3 more matches to play. There's still involvement in the Coupe de la Ligue. There's still involvement in the Coupe de France. Lille, I believe, and Montpellier are both eliminated this week from the Coupe de la Ligue. So the league is going to be the prize for those sides. And we saw Montpellier in particular look incredibly hungry. And Lille have so many weapons in attack that it's going to be hard for Marseille to catch those two, let alone the likes of Saint-Etienne and Lyon, and even Strasbourg, who have looked fairly sharp this season as well. I think it's not necessarily a matter of Marseille's quality from here on out, but it's a matter of how many teams that they have to overhaul and how that pans out. So I think going forward, Garcia has to trust players more, perhaps look at something a little bit differently tactically. Is that playing at the likes of a Sertic or a Sertic in midfield to give a little bit more solidity there? I think that, Strootman, perhaps has looked a little bit off the boil. He played well against PSG, but certainly on the evening, he was not at his best. And to look at how to reinforce that side, because certainly we know Marseille have the gifts, but it's going to be the confidence taken from recording clean sheets, from recording good, solid defensive results that are going to allow this team to progress and get back to where they really want to be, given the investment, given the history of this club.
Yeah, it's been a frustrating time for them. And Rich, to add to that misery at the moment is their Europa League form as well, which they obviously go back into on Thursday night. But in all likelihood, if the Lazio turn up like they did last week, where Marseille were truly awful at midweek, they'll likely be heading out the door on that one as well, which might be a blessing in disguise, at least for their league form. But it just adds to the disappointment that the fans would have been feeling this season, that they should be more competitive in these games. And given that they were so bad on Thursday night, you thought you would have seen a reaction this evening, but that clearly wasn't the case.
Well, yeah, I mean, you almost think, do they just forget about that Lazio game now? Forget about the Europa League. Realize that they need to get their season back on track. They've got a very kind game coming up, final game before the international break at home to Dijon next weekend. That's a game that, if they can put in a good performance there, get the win, at least go into the international break in a slightly more positive mood, to then come back, because they then got Amiens away, which is not. It's not a walk in the park, but it's, again, it's a winnable game. And then they have Reims at home, which again, is a winnable game. So they've got a run of 3 league games where, we will see that, or we will see whether Marseille really, do have that hunger and desire to push on, because, if they don't and they slip up in those 3 games, it really could be curtains for that Champions League qualification.
Yeah, especially given the teams that are playing around them. And just before we move on, a brief point, Eric, on Montpellier, a team we've talked about a few times this season, as they've built up a good head of steam. They started scoring goals again, and we said on Thursday as well that this game would be massively important to see where they are benchmark-wise against one of the bigger sides, since they'd played a lot of sort of mid to lower table sides. This really was a statement winner, and also with Laborde grabbing 2, he's confident they're scoring goals. Mollet was excellent again as well. We're praising all the attacking players for Montpellier, which under a Desakarian side, it feels a little bit strange still doing.
Yeah, I think it's, obviously Montpellier, one of those clubs who, yes, I know that they won the league a few years ago, but have been sort of the archetypal French club. They've always been forced to sell, whether that's been the likes of Niakate, Jérôme Roussillon, going back a couple of seasons, Riyad Boudebouz, Steve Mounier. But I think that this summer, again, the loss of Niakate was not as significant this summer, but I think that the club and the hierarchy saw green shoots with what Zakarian was doing and allowed him to make investments in attacking players in Mollet, Laborde, and Delors. And we think about in Delors at his best. We think back to him being such a key figure for Patrice Caron's Caen a few seasons ago, and Laborde the same way, being that exact balance of physicality, aerial ability, and pace, and willingness to press. And if you were to design sort of an ideal striker for Michel Zakarian's systems, those 2 would be it. And I think that, Mollet, now that he's got confidence, he's free of injury, is back to being the player who Metz had hoped they would get when they signed him, and really wasn't for the Granat due to his injury record. But again, there's a lot more to come, I think, before season's end. I think in December alone, Montpellier have Lille, PSG, and Lyon. It's certainly a hefty-looking month. There's Rennes to come before November's out as well. So certainly there's going to be tests against more ambitious sides. Nantes, who again are in form, as we'll get to. I think Montpellier, I think we can think back about how a side like a Guingamp or an Angers did very well through the first half of the season in recent years, but sort of were revealed by the fixture list or by just teams cottoning onto what they were doing in recent years. But I think Montpellier, again, Marseille are out of sorts, but the fact that Montpellier continued to be, as Michel Decarion's sides have always been, looking back at his time at Nantes, exceptionally defensively solid, but the way that attack is so cohesive, is so dynamic, I think this is something that can be sustained, and I think it shows the value of reinvestment. And as a counterpoint to this, we can look at teams like a Guingamp who are really struggling, not having had much reinvestment made in that club, despite players moving on in the summer.
Yeah, huge credit to them. There's, like you say, there's almost a murderer's row for them next up, really, the next couple of weeks. But that's what you get when you have a softer schedule to start off with. And I'm pretty certain while they'll be like looking at some of the tougher teams and thinking that it's going to be a big test for them, I'm sure other teams will be thinking now after this result that it's not going to be very easy for them either. On to another side. In big trouble, you might say, is Monaco. They've lost again this weekend as they fell to a 1-0 result against Reims. There's still injury worries and some teething problems, admittedly, Rich. So it's still with a grain of salt, but it's now 4 games under Henry. It's a little bit more easier to judge the ground that he's been given, but 2 league defeats and a draw and a draw in the Champions League against Bruges, and likely their swan song in that competition coming in midweek if other results don't go their way as well. It's been a tough start, and the pressure might already quickly be on him after a result against a side where, while they've won 2 games in a row, and credit, they're not exactly the most fearsome side in Ligue.
Yeah, it's starting to look major problems for Monaco now. To have forced out Jardim, we know that it was a serious issue that was going on with Monaco and their form in the start of the season. But there has been no respite to that. I think Thierry Henry came out after the match and said, my players are unintentionally not playing the way I want. We've still got the issue that we were addressing with Jardim when he was there at the start of the season. There's still a lack of clear understanding what the best 11 is through this squad. I truly believe that. So I don't envy Henry in that regard. It's the same problems. It really is. It's the the young players just being way too raw. It's the senior players not performing. You look at that team. It shouldn't be on paper. It should be nowhere near the foot of the table. They are experienced players who have, some of them have won the title. You look at the likes of Campbell Glick and Jemison. That was the a Ligue 1 winning centre back pairing. They're not performing. You've got a real lack of, I think you've got a real lack of muscle in midfield. Benassa has not played a huge amount of football. Tielemans has been, has certainly veered on the side of disappointing. You look at the fact that they brought in Chadley in the summer, and then you've got the likes of Sofiane Diop, you've got the likes of Moussa Silla, incredibly raw. It's a struggle for Henry, and at the minute, it's really looking difficult to see how he gets out of this. The players have to respond. Now, if he's claiming that the players are unintentionally not playing the way that he wants them to play, well, that's on him. That's on him to get that message across to the players, to get them playing intentionally how he wants them to play. And if that doesn't work, then he needs to change what his expectations are. Because ultimately the squad, even with all those raw young players, the squad is still a good squad. At worst, it's a lower end of the top half of the table kind of a squad, really, all things considered. But at the minute, players are incredibly low in confidence. They don't seem to be knowing particularly what they're doing on the pitch. There's a real lack of understanding between the squad and between the message that's coming across from the dugout. So Thierry Henry has a massive job on his hands. What's going to be interesting, of course, is how long. It seems stupid to say only four games into his tenure, but how long do Monaco give him? If he doesn't turn things around, and come the start of 2019, we're sat here and we're still talking about Monaco being in the bottom three. Is Henry going to be given that time to see out the rest of the season to try and rescue it? Because I'm not entirely sure this team, this project, and everything that sort of constitutes it can afford to drop down. A relegation is, it's sort of apocalyptic, really, I think, for this Monaco team. So, there is a big task ahead for Henry, and I think what we've seen over these 4 games is that the realization of the situation and the severity of the situation have really sort of slapped him around the face. I think you saw that in the press conference after the game. There was a real sort of serious worried look in his eyes. So it's I think the next few weeks are going to prove very telling for Monaco and Henry.
It has to. I mean, Eric, the excuses start going a little thin after a while of the young player bits, because especially in this game, okay, they went behind in the first half, but Alexis Romao got sent off after 50 minutes. They had plenty of time then to down to 10 men to pile on the pressure. Instead, Pele, a 27-year-old who's pounded around a little bit, yes, but he's experienced enough, gets himself sent off. And they end the game, really, with the substitutions he made were Tielemans, Diop and Silla coming off, the youngsters for Gronsier, Falcao and Pele, who have experience. The team on there, Ait Benacer's played plenty of Ligue 1 football. Golovin's played plenty of games for Cesca and Champions League games, so has Nasser Chadli. Glick's wealth experience. Benjamin Hendricks has played in the Champions League with Bayer Leverkusen. Diego Benaglio has as well when he was at Wolfsburg. These aren't players without great experience, yet against a team that does struggle to score goals. Yes, they've been really solid defensively, and credit to Reims the last couple of weeks for turning around results and making themselves much more difficult to beat, and it's helped them gain some really big wins. But the excuses really for Monaco's players, at least, are really running thin.
I suppose so, but I think we should really look critically at Monaco's transfer policy. Looking at the summer they had before the title-winning season, the big names being brought in were Glick. I guess we didn't really know much about him as for the casual Ligue 1 observer. If you knew about how good he was at Torino and for Poland, I guess you're a keen observer of football. But look at the likes of Sidibe and Mendy coming in. These are players who at the time had each played somewhere in the neighborhood of 100, 150 matches professionally, had played in the Champions League, but more critically knew Ligue 1, save Glick. And I think that the improvements in that regard, you had Germain coming back on loan from Nice. He played a key role in terms of his versatility and ability to finish off matches as well and attack. The players that are coming in this season, there are a few that I think fit the archetype and make sense. Aoulou, who had a good season with Strasbourg last season, I think makes sense. But beyond that, I think that the intensity and the physicality that we naturally associate with Ligue 1 is not something that has necessarily been ingrained into a lot of these players. And perhaps they're thinking because they view Ligue 1 from the outside, and they, perhaps they can talk to an international teammate or something like that to know, what that's like. Maybe Benjamin Hendricks speaks with Julien Draxler about the quality of Ligue 1. I don't know. But I think that quality has been a rude awakening for a lot of these players, and that intensity, that quality, we saw, for example, from Montpellier this evening, how intense and how driven teams can be. And especially, I know Monaco aren't the force they were 2 years ago, but it's still Thierry Henry. It's still a side that's in the Champions League. It's still a scalp. So, especially against clubs of much lesser means, Reims being a good example, I don't feel that these players, even with some experience, as you mentioned, Pele there, or Nasser Chadli, I don't feel that they're necessarily ready to stand up and fight for this project, because their question is, if I am a Pelé or a Chadley, why have I been brought here? I've not been brought here for my sell-on value, clearly. So I'm not putting myself in the shop window. I'm not going to buckle down and improve. I mean, we saw that picture with Benjamin Mendy. So there's a lack of motivation. There's a lack of familiarity with the league. And I think there's frankly a lack of understanding with how much tactical instability this team's had, both under Henry, but also under Jardim. I think it's been a matter from both managers of throwing whatever they can at the wall tactically and getting it to stick. So those two factors are really the undoing of this side. I think that there's potentially improvement to come if you get players playing the way that they can. I really like Youssef Nasser. I think he's someone who should be given more time. Aulu as well. Ronnie Lopez coming back to full fitness. We saw his form down the back end of last season being really integral to their push for the Champions League. But I think this team as constructed now is players who, by professional necessity, are on so many different pages, as it were, in terms of their professional career, in terms of their ambitions, in terms of their outlook for the future, that to have this side in such disarray is only natural. It's really difficult to expect that there be another outcome other than what we're seeing right now from this side.
Yeah, couldn't have picked a tougher job to walk into, but we'll wait and see, and we'll obviously keep a keen eye on how it's getting on for him in a big midweek game as well for them, possibly their last Champions League outing for a little while at least. Anyway, they're likely heading out, but they won't be wanting to go out without a little bit of a fight at least. On to more positive things and a couple of sides that are going to be in Champions League action this weekend. And starting with Paris Saint-Germain, Rich, who broke more records this weekend, 12 wins in a row, but it didn't come as easily as they may have expected, even though Lille have been really good this season. The first half was a bit lackluster, but they did control things in the second half at times and eventually found the breakthrough. And credit where credit is due. Paris Saint-Germain are now Europe's best ever start in Europe to a season in the top 5 major leagues with 12 wins in a row. It's something that will go down for a long while and may, given the length of time it was until there was 12 wins in a row previously, it might never be beaten again.
Well, no, it might not. And at the moment, it seems it's difficult to see when the run will actually end. I think Lille certainly represented the biggest test for PSG. We've been obviously full of praise for how they've played and started the season. And certainly, you thought after the first 45 minutes, although PSG, dominated in terms of possession, and there was obviously the Marquinhos effort where he probably should have scored. Lille didn't give up too many clear-cut opportunities. I thought Lille looked relatively comfortable. Perhaps not offering, arguably understandably so, not offering as much going forward as we've come to expect this season. But PSG ultimately, you always felt were in control. It's probably worth noting that there was a slight element of fortune in both the PSG goals. The Neymar pass through to Mbappe got a very key, crucial deflection on its way through. But you do not take away anything of what a fantastic finish that was from Mbappe, and I think just shows how far he's come. I think you rewind the clock back, not even 12 months. He probably would have taken a touch there. He'd have probably run in on goal, still probably scored, but he wouldn't. I don't think he'd have had that confidence in his own ability to have taken that opportunity on first time from a couple of yards outside the area. To have finished that, with that level of accomplishment, the adage goes that great strikers just know where the goal is, and he barely needed to look up. That ball came through, and it was it was a deflected ball as well, so it wasn't necessarily going where he anticipated it to go, but the reactions and then the sheer quality of that finish were absolutely fantastic. And then the Neymar goal, I thought Neymar was probably at the better end of his spectrum. He looked confident and full of tricks, and got a goal that probably his performance deserved, but that in itself had a wicked deflection on it as well. So, a slight element of fortune, but fortune favours those that play well and force the fortune on their side. And there's no doubting that PSG warranted and merited the win with their performance. It was another solid performance, if not a spectacular one. But yeah, it's really difficult, I think, to see where this winning run ends. They're capable of performing in what felt like third gear for large portions of that game against who this season are looking to be like their nearest rivals. If they can afford to operate in third gear for probably 75% of the match and still come out with the 3 points, you fear for the rest of the team, the rest of the teams in the division, and fear for any team hoping to smash this record of PSG's, because I just don't see where it ends.
Yeah, it's everlasting at the moment, really. And Eric, they've got a big game in midweek as they take on Napoli. It takes more significance given the fact that the result last weekend, or 2 weeks ago, that they got a draw in the end. They almost lost it, but with the group so tight, having Napoli beaten Liverpool earlier and Liverpool beating PSG, there's a little bit of pressure in this one, isn't there, to get a win away from home? It's not going to be the easiest of tasks. They'll be delighted to get an extra day's rest, but the focus really for the next, given their sort of lackadaisical first half, at least you can forgive them maybe for their focus being slightly elsewhere. And this game is going to be massive in midweek.
Yeah, it is. I think that a slight amount of pressure is an understatement. But that being said, I do think that we're seeing these players become more and more comfortable with adapting to this three-man defense that has been adopted by Thomas Tuchel. And there's really, I think, in particular, Angel Di Maria. I mean, he's been fairly brilliant for really all of this calendar year, but I think he's really taking it up a notch, playing in this central midfield role, which gives him a little bit more freedom to both use his work rate to help out in defense, but also to play a creative role. I believe he's got 6 assists so far. That's the best figure in Ligue 1, and I think we're back to seeing him be that player that we saw near the end of his time at Real Madrid as being, if not a world-class talent, certainly approaching that level. And I think that, how to fit Cavani into this side still is a little bit of an issue. I know he missed this match on Friday through injury and remains a doubt for the match in midweek. But I think there's a lot of really good signs here that, PSG, the players, you think about Thiago Silva, Thiago Motta, Zlatan Ibrahimovic. There's even Marco Verratti and Neymar, and maybe Mbappe to a certain extent. There's always been this sort of cult of player power about them. But I think that we're seeing with Tuchel an evolution and a really impressive level of performance. I know the Champions League has been frustrating, but it's a tough group, and I think that, it all depends on this week, but I think that there's really a lot of impressive signs here from this side that they can continue to improve. And it might take a very bold call for the club to be patient with Tuchel should they be eliminated, but I think they should be patient with him, and I think they should allow this team to develop and to continue to grow and be a sustainable, coherent project, which they have rarely looked in the QSI era. They've always looked more like a collection of stars and players thrown sort of haphazardly together rather than a significantly coherent team unit. So I think that, Napoli, we saw in excellent form on Friday, are still to be feared. They seem to be really improving tactically themselves under Carlo Ancelotti, and I think that there's going to be certainly a measure of revenge there for Ancelotti against his former club. So it's going to be a dangerous proposition. But you've got Kimpembe coming back into the side in place of Kerr on the left side of that three. That's going to be an improvement, and I think that things look very good for PSG. I think they're going to get a lot of confidence from this win because Lille played a decent match. Xhaka and Thiago Mendes in particular were all over the place in midfield. Were very aggressive, pressed very intensely, but still, I think that PSG played with a lot of confidence, and that'll fit them well in what's going to be a difficult trip.
Yeah, and credit to Lille. Like you say, Eric, I thought they were pretty good. It was just a little bit of that front line, wasn't it? I think that Nicolas Pepe and Bamba were maybe a little bit too eager at times. They lost the ball. They had a bit of frustration. They didn't quite control things and break into attacks as fluently as they did, especially in the first half. But I think they'll have the chance to bounce back soon enough. They look like a really good side that's going to stick around there. And on to another side in Champions League action this weekend will be Lyon. It's another big game for them in midweek, at least, and we'll start with that. Rich, I'll speak to Eric about the weekend's game at least anyway. But facing Hoffenheim, they were disappointed not to get that result last time out. They head back to Lyon this time around and with renewed optimism, although Depay may have another couple of things to say about it yet, but we'll wait and see. But a chance for them that if they do get a victory against Hoffenheim, they're really in the driving seat to advance to the next round. Yeah,
I think they'll be looking at with a couple of tricky games to round the group off. Obviously, the return fixture of their tie against Man City, and then they finish away in the Ukraine. They'll see this as a game that if those 3 points, it suddenly eases the pressure perhaps on those final two games. It was disappointing. For all the positives in that performance in Germany, it was disappointing that they couldn't hold on for all 3 points. They'll be wary that since then, Hoffenheim have looked very good in the Bundesliga and are going through a bit of a free-scoring spell themselves. So it's certainly not going to be an easy game, certainly not a straightforward game. And the performance yesterday was far from ideal to give them that confidence going into the game on, I think, is it Wednesday they're playing, I think, this week. But it's a game that's winnable, definitely. But they're definitely going to have to up their game. The performance this weekend was not good enough, and will not be enough to earn them the 3 points that they will really need this week. So Genesio is going to have to look at his team. I fully expect there to be changes from the lineup that went up against Bordeaux this weekend. But I think there's enough there with Lyon that they are capable of getting that win.
Absolutely, and they've got to watch out for the Hoffenheim's attack. They might not be as fruitless as Bordeaux's, although they did end up getting a goal that they needed, Eric, in that 1-1 draw. And the talk all week, and we talked about it in the midweek show as well, is the sort of Depay fiasco, him calling out saying he needs to be starting games, Genesio calling out I'm out in the thing, and his chance to put up or shut up, maybe some people would say. And again, we saw a typical Depay performance that leaked into a typical Lyon performance at the moment, where they just don't really know how to, once they've got a league, how to kill off a game, and they sort of settle into second gear, and yet again it's come back to bite them.
Yeah, I mean, even the win against Angers before the Hoffenheim match, again they conceded a late goal to. I'm sorry, that was a week ago. It wasn't before the Hoffenheim match, but again they conceded a late goal to the Spanish striker for Angers, Christian Lopez, I believe is his surname.
Yeah.
So, but again, that's 3 matches running now that they conceded a goal in the last quarter of the match, and I understand you've got tired legs. Pop Sheikh Diop was suspended for this match, I believe. I mean, why not start Jordan Ferry? Why not why not give Toussaint or Ndombele the entire match off rather than having them be run ragged and half tired for the midweek fixture? And Ndombele was fine, good, but is it really necessary? Are Lyon that shallow in terms of attack and ingenuity and strong play that they have to play Aouar 90 minutes, have to play Ndombele and Toussaint for large parts of the match? I think that's a little bit frustrating. I know trying to navigate the Payet situation, trying to navigate Fekir just returning now from injury is a little bit tricky, but I still think that Genesio, like we talked about with Rudy Garcia, seems perhaps not to trust certain players, even given strong performances in the past. And Maxwell Cornet is fit again. Perhaps he's a better option to come on, in terms of trying to stretch play against Bordeaux. Perhaps Martin Terrier gets more of a look in, and we see Lyon play a 4-2-3-1 instead of a 4-3-1-2, with Terrier playing on the left flank and Aouar playing in midfield. In place of with one of Toussaint and Ndombele starting on the bench, I think that there are options that have been successful for Genesio in the past in terms of his tactical outlook, and I think that he just really seems to be over-reliant on certain players. And like we said, this came back to bite Lyon at certain points last season. I think that we saw very sharp declines in form from particularly Toussaint and Fekir, and injury was a factor for Fekir last season. But those two in particular, I think we saw very sharp declines in form. We had obviously the likes of Memphis and Bertrand Traore improving their form last season to get back, allow Lyon to get that Champions League place. But Genesio has to be more willing to rotate this side if he wants to get, given their results so far, which should be a pretty easy road to progression into the knockout rounds, which I think, given the squad that Lyon have, should be their aim. I think that, they seem to have bought fairly well over the summer. I think Dembele has been a little bit fitful, adjusting to a new league, but I think Denayer has been a fairly strong signing. I think Dubois has been, obviously injury has been a mitigating factor with him, but I think that, yes, there's no Ruben Dias, but, Lyon should have more depth, should have more ability this season, and I think that Genesio simply needs to look to his bench a little bit more, given how well some of those players have performed in the past. I mean, Jordan Ferry, say what you want. I know he's a hothead. He's the yellow card waiting to happen, but he was a very integral part of that team in 2014-15, where Lyon pushed PSG for the title until the last 7 or 8 weeks. And I think that against a team like Bordeaux, who themselves are perhaps a little bit distracted by Europe, and have looked decent under Ricardo/Eric Bedouet, but that's the kind of match when you need to perhaps take a flyer and see what happens with some of those reserve players without having to tax your key players so heavily. So I think that Genesio just simply needs to think more critically about how he's using these players, how he's overusing some of these players, and how that fits in with what is a decently deep squad.
Yeah, and it's going to be an important game in midweek, and it's important for Genesio to work that out, really, because they are a team that, you look at the table and there is certainly a chance for Lyon to take that second place should they hit the form that we expect of them. But another disappointing result for them this weekend. On to a game between two sides that are sort of passing ships in the night at the moment, really, is maybe the best way to describe it. And it's Nantes and Guingamp who Lecaneri go ahead with a 5-0 victory in this one. Rich, the reason we wanted to highlight them really is they've scored 11 goals in their last 3 games. It's a stark contrast to the start of the season, where they did really struggle at times, not just to necessarily score goals consistently, but get results. At least it led to Cardozo's sacking, but it's certainly changed dramatically in the last couple of weeks under new management, and a great result for them. Salah grabbing a couple of goals, and they're playing attacking football. Le Canary fans must be delighted.
Yeah, it's certainly a stark difference to the team that we saw under Ranieri, who were solid defensively, but certainly weren't the most exciting of teams to watch. I don't have the stats at hand, but 11 goals in 3 games. It's probably a long time since Nantes have notched up that number of goals in that shorter spell. It's nice to see. It's what we've been hoping for, I think, from Nantes for a long time, is that they have established themselves as a very organised but defensively minded team who perhaps just lack that ambition going forward, and maybe they arguably lack the quality perhaps as well going forward to sort of make things a little bit easier for themselves, rather than having to rely on that defence. Certainly, I think the loan signing of Gabriel Bachelier from Monaco has made a huge difference. I think he's looked excellent in his brief time with the club. You've got Salah, who's suddenly found a red hot pair of scoring boots, and he's now already reached double figures for the season. Only Mbappe has scored more than Salah this season. He notched a brace today. He notched a hat trick the other day. He is in fine scoring form. It just seems a team that now have added that attacking element to the team. They've got the players. They've always worked hard, but have perhaps just lacked the confidence, or, as I say, the quality to go forward. But maybe the introduction of Bachelier to that team, that little slight hint of sort of a bit of skill, bit of flair, that has been severely missing from that team for a long time. Maybe that's just been the key element to unlock this Nantes team, because certainly the last few weeks since Halilhodžić came into the dugout, they've been a completely different team. The performance today was heavily caveated. The penalty that opened the scoring just before the break was very, very fortunate. It was a very soft penalty. Salah went down very easily. And Guingamp, rightfully have got good, have just cause to complain about that. But what Guingamp don't have just cause for was the state of their defending in the second half, because all 4 of those goals in the second half had an element of a mistake from the Guingamp defence, be it poor touches, be it poor clearances, be it poor marking. All 4 of those goals in the second half, Guingamp could have prevented. And that's the worry, is that they imploded. Yes, it was a rough decision on them to award that penalty just before the break, because up until that point, Guingamp were holding their own, but to have imploded as they did in that second half, that's unforgivable. I don't care whether it's Nantes, whether it's PSG, whether it's any team in the top flight, to have imploded in the manner that they did, which was inflicting the damage on themselves. You fear that Kombouaré is not for long with Guingamp, for starters, but you fear that there is a terminal confidence issue and quality issue in that Guingamp side, that it's just going to add up to them being doomed, and you really struggle to see their way out from this.
First of all, credit to Emiliano Sala, the person I always look like. Say, he looks a little bit like Bambi on ice, but he's had a terrific season, and this is now we're not even halfway through the season, and it's his most prolific season in French football. So credit to him for turning it around and showing the quality he's got. Although it sometimes maybe looks almost on by accident sometimes, but credit to him for grabbing plenty of goals. But Eric. Rich has mentioned it already, and I do want to focus on Guingamp's poor form again as well, because we obviously highlighted them considerably at the start of the season with 6 defeats in a row. They were bottom of the table, but after a draw against Nîmes that finally got them a point, and a win against Angers, we thought, okay, maybe this is the point where Guingamp turned things around. But since then, they've had 3 straight draws, and then this humiliating sort of defeat earlier today as well, which it's not exactly what you want from any team. But the worry is now they're still only on 7 points, which is at least joint with Monaco, but they're still a little bit cut adrift. Do you agree with Rich? Are we maybe on is Qumbare starting to be maybe on borrowed time? There's a game against Lyon next weekend, against Reims the weekend after that. They have to start picking up something, don't they? Otherwise, that crisis of confidence that seemed to inflict them today, and if it happens again, it might be curtains.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I think that we look at their summer signings, Ronny Rodlan and Nolan Roux, through injury, have not really had a chance to get going. Rodlan was, I believe, fit again in the Coupe de la Ligue in midweek. Missed this match through injury. Roux hasn't played in something like a month, if I recall correctly. And Marcus Thuram has been suspended. I think this was the last match of his suspension. But again, he is their joint leading goal scorer with Nicolas Benezet. I think he's looked an improved player, but a stupid dismissal has cost him. So I think Guingamp were looking better, as you mentioned, but they've just been so blunted in attack without, again, Rodlan and Roux, their key summer signings, haven't had a chance to really be included in the team. Hasn't had a chance for Cambore's not had a chance to really figure out what his best system is either. I think that he's been playing this 5-4-1 of late, really out of necessity, but if you're playing Marcus Coco as your nominal striker, I think that's only going to go one way. Nantes are not really a team that could be got at in that way. They're not a team that suffers playing on the counter. So, I think that the jury's still out, but I think if we're still seeing, not turning in half a point a match, if they're on, say, I don't know, anything less than 15 points come the winter break, I think that we do have to look at them being, a dead cert for relegation. But again, Roux, Thuram, Rodlan, I think are three key players, along with Benezet. Those are the four probably key players, that Cambore had been looking to in attack this season. And he's not really had them, with the exception of Benezet, he's not really had them at his disposal as he would like. So I have faith in Cambore as a manager. So I'd like to see how that sort of shakes out before we're really ready to hammer the nails into Guingamp's coffin, as it were. I think that it's easy to see them getting, say, 9 or 10 points from a span of 5 matches. Where would that put them? I mean, probably not mid-table, but not cut adrift as badly as they currently are.
I think that's the worry. It's going to take some steel ones if some more results and hammerings come their way in the next couple of weeks. I know Reims aren't necessarily going to do that, but they are certainly a team that's proven that they're difficult to score against, and with Guingamp struggling to score, it's not going to be ideal. And Lyon, unless they give them another gift, will be another difficult tie as well. It does start looking worrying for Qumbare, certainly, if they do get a little bit twishy-fingered, even though they did give them that contract earlier at the start of the season. Maybe not the best idea at this moment in time, at least. And let's head on to our final section tonight, and that's, as always, our Ligue and snapshots. And I'll start with yourself, Rich. What haven't we spoken about this evening that our fans in French football need to know about?
Probably a light-hearted one, although not for calm fans to finish with. Miss of the season. I don't think this will be beaten. I don't think this will be beaten in any league this season, and it came in Caen's defeat to Rennes this weekend. Ball comes across, 2 Caen players, open goal. I'm not exaggerating by saying it's less than 1 yard out, and Casimir Ninga somehow I've watched numerous replays. Thomas Kubek, the Rennes goalkeeper, is nowhere to be seen. There are no Rennes defenders to be seen. It's not a bobbling ball. It's not not a high ball, a quick ball, a slow ball. It's nothing like that. It's a perfectly normal pass across goal, and somehow he misses it. I've got on my Twitter feed, I've got the video. You'll be able to find it in all sorts of places. It's one of those misses that you just, even as a Rennes fan watching that game, even I had my hands over my eyes of how's that happened, because it is the miss of the season, and I defy anybody to see a worse miss than that this season across any division.
Yeah, if only they still had those Christmas blooper videos, it would be certainly on one of those at least. Anyway, Eric, what's your Ligue snapshot this week?
I think the surprising resurgence of Nîmes. I know Dijon aren't any great shakes defensively, and we've talked at length about how poor they've been. But having Teji Savanier back from suspension, I think has given this team the dynamism it's used to having. How completely he can really control a match, I think, was on fine display on Saturday evening. And scoring 4 goals, looking every bit the side that they ought to be. A clean sheet, which is again no small matter. Again, Nîmes have struggled defensively. That should give confidence to that pairing of Briançon and Lange as well. Fatou Maouassa, on loan from Rennes, perhaps is making a name for himself at left back. And that might be a position of need for you, Rich, depending on how you feel about Romain Bensebaini. So maybe we can see Nîmes coming back into being the side that they had looked for much of the first month of this season. As being that side that you simply have to watch. Thinking about that match against Marseille, that match against PSG, where they were so compelling. I know Dijon are not on that level, but I think that a willingness to play in that dynamic, exciting, attacking style is something that's too often lacking in Liga. And if Nîmes are going to want to continue to do that, so much the better. And especially with such a largely relatively young side. I know that the Briançon and Lange aren't so young, but you've got Paul Bernardoni, you've got Salah Thioub, Denis Bouanga is still fairly young, Baptiste Guillaume, Mouma Bozok. There's really I think a lot of exciting players to watch in this Nîmes side. So it's good to see them being back to their best, even again with mitigating circumstance given the level of their opposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did say that would be a game to watch out for earlier this season, but maybe expected a little more help from Dijon. But the game that everyone should have been looking out for, and this is my snapshot, because we predicted a few high-scoring games, I remember on Thursday, Rich, but none of them really suspended. But one of them that we didn't mention, and that was Saint-Etienne versus Angers, the game of the weekend, 4-3, an excellent game of back and forth. It ebbed and flowed. Went Saint-Etienne's way to start off with, and then Angers took advantage, and then Saint-Etienne came back again, but Angers went in front again, and then 2 goals, well, very late goal at least, sealed it for Saint-Etienne as they came from behind. An excellent win for them in their hopes for Europa League football next season, but a terrific game, and both sides contributed to that, and two sides in all likelihood will be at least nowhere near the relegation fights, but at least they'll put some more entertaining displays on and like that. Please, thank you very much. That's all that we have time for this evening. My thanks to Eric, Rich, and all of you listening at home. Do join us for the preview show on Thursday. But for now, à bientôt and goodbye.